How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado. And last week we talked about the suburbs west of Denver. This week, part 2 of a 4-part series, we're going to talk about the suburbs east of Denver. And we are starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everton, listener. If you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons, moving to or around the Denver Metro and Colorado Front Range, this is definitely the channel for you, and you're going to want to click on that subscribe button below. And as much as I try to be informative here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of the state's most talented realtors. And we're helping people like you move here each and every day. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person, answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails, there, when and if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is looking at the eastern suburbs of Denver, the pros, the cons, and where I might even consider living myself. All right, so I'm creating this 4-part series on the various directions, suburbs of Denver, because when I talk to a lot of people who are thinking about moving here, they're kind of coming from a blank canvas. Sure, they may have visited Denver, they may have even spent a decent amount of time here, but when you start thinking about moving to a town, it's really hard when you have dozens of suburbs to choose from and you don't really know the nuances of living in one direction from the city or a certain distance from Denver, and maybe that difference between, say, 20 minutes into the western suburbs compared to 20 minutes into the eastern suburbs. So today we're going to talk about the eastern suburbs of Denver. We are not going to take them in any type of ranked order. We're going to take them geographically from north to south on these eastern suburbs and really just give you some general nuances. One thing I want to be clear about this video, we're not going to go into high level detail for the locations. Otherwise, I would be keeping you here for an hour and a half. However, after we go over this kind of general pro and con of each community, I do have specific videos within my library on these communities that you are certainly, and I encourage you to check out. So having said that, we're going to start with Commerce City, located northeast of Denver, typically up I-76. And Commerce City has a ton of new construction. It's one of the fastest developing communities or suburbs of the Denver area. And because of this, and this is a reoccurring theme on the east side of town because of how much construction there is, affordability is usually a premium compared to the Denver average, certainly compared to other areas such as the western side of town when we talk about suburbs there. Because of all that new development, you'll see a lot of master plan communities within Commerce City where they've thought through where the shop's going to be, the rec centers, the trails that lead from a park to the next neighborhood. So a lot of master plan communities and very well done, in my opinion. There's some beautiful communities there in Commerce City. You also, and this will definitely be a reoccurring theme, you're also very close to Denver International Airport. So if getting to and from the airport is important to you, you're in good shape there. That will be a part of what you would consider for most of these eastern suburbs. Denver International Airport is in, technically East Denver, East Aurora area. So most of these communities will give you quick access to the airport. And then the last thing I'd mention as far as a pro is that there's still a lot of growth in Commerce City. Again, you're going to hear this for the eastern part of Denver because of the fact that it's flat and it's plains. There's a lot of room for growth and developments. You continue to see that with Commerce City. Now, negatives, think about the name of the town itself, Commerce City. So Commerce City was very industrious, remains that way in many areas. So you're going to see some oil and gas patch, industrial areas. And the new construction there can be a bit patchwork. So you'll have these really pretty communities, and then you'll have some that they seem to be like right across the street from an oil and gas, again, industrial area or something commercial. And it just kind of can throw you off. That's not to say that that's everywhere in Commerce City, but it does still exist as this, all these new communities are built. And then the other aspect that I hear quite a bit from clients and friends that live in the area is that your school consistency, as far as the quality of education, can be a bit up and down. So because there's so much new construction, you have this mix of like older neighborhoods and older schools per se, and the newer schools. It's not, a community as a whole that's been established for decades upon decades, and you have some level of consistency. I think you're going to hear this to some extent in areas like Aurora as well, but that was a big one that kept coming up when I talked to people about Commerce City. Now, by far, the largest suburb that Denver has is Aurora, which is right on its eastern side. And Aurora stretches to Denver's northernmost point, and stretches a bit south of it, a huge suburb. So because of that, we're going to take Aurora into a few different sections and talk through them, because to try to just talk about Aurora as this bland statement, the experience and what you're going to see from one area of Aurora to another is pretty vast. So we begin with kind of north and central Aurora along Colfax, Fitzsimmons, Montview. So we're talking east of Denver proper, we're talking north of Alameda, west of Tower Road, and some of the pros of this area. Big one is Anschutz, the Anschutz Medical Campus, which is a huge job center. Anschutz has had a major impact on Aurora as a whole. Huge for education, obviously huge for the medical field. I mean, it's a big deal there. Also in this same area is one of the largest VA hospitals and the largest VA hospital of the state. This has impacted transit access. So you've got great light rail and bus lines that run straight to downtown from this area. Aurora is also, in this area of Aurora, is high for its diverse culture and food scene. Some of the best restaurants you're going to find are in these areas. You'll see authentic eats, you'll see global markets, and it definitely has a community flavor to it. And then again, as we mentioned, that affordability, it's a big reason that people are going to look into Aurora and communities like it, where you can still find a single family house for, the mid 400s up to 500,000 for price points. You're still going to find condos and townhomes that are, again, by Denver standards, pretty affordable. Your negatives is you're going to see crime rates as you do your research. Crime rates are higher in certain pockets. You're going to see aging housing stock, meaning that some of these communities have been around for decades upon decades. I live in Lakewood, Colorado. I always see kind of these similarities between Aurora and Lakewood, especially as you look at neighborhoods that are closer to Denver itself. That's where you tend to see the oldest neighborhoods. And again, not to say that these are bad neighborhoods. They were just built first. Many of them were built 30s, 40s, 50s for Aurora. So the farther east you go in Aurora, the newer the homes will be. Of course, the same applies to Lakewood. The farther west you go, the newer the houses are. And then a couple other things that I noticed about Aurora, and as I talked to people I heard. First is that some of their zoning is a little wild. So you might have a duplex, and then a 7-Eleven, and then a vacant lot, kind of like all on the same block. It could be a little weird there in certain sections, and then traffic congestion. And I think this is a big thing on the eastern side of town. There's a lot of service roads. There's not as many access, or there's not as many freeways per se. And so because of that, you tend to see just more traffic congestion in these areas. Now, East Aurora, where we're talking about areas like Painted Prairie, High Point, Green Valley Ranch, there you're kind of bordering Denver International Airport. You're on E470. You're out east of Tower Road. Again, I'm going to keep pounding the drum. This is going to be an area filled with a ton of new construction. And there is so much new construction happening in East Aurora and just really reaching out into the Eastern Plains as we head out farther from Denver. So you're going to see a ton of those modern new builds. You're going to see that they're energy efficient. You're going to see they have a ton of builder incentives, which is not good for my lending career, but perhaps good for home buyers. And I wouldn't discourage you from looking at that. You're going to see, again, those planned communities. You're going to see that they thought about parks and trails and being integrated. Yes, the farther you go east of Denver, the farther you're getting away from the mountains, but they're still trying to give you these elements of enjoying getting outside and enjoying being in Colorado. And then again, pound that drum, relative affordability. You're still going to find homes sub 500s, and some of these being quality new construction. So certainly something you might want to take a peek at. Negatives here, you'll see some sparsity to these properties. You'll see that the homes are ready, but maybe the groceries or the restaurants, the grocery stores or the restaurants aren't yet, or there's not a lot there yet. HOA rules. From some of my friends who have moved to the area, some of my clients who have moved to the area, the HOA rules can be pretty steep, pretty demanding, just something to be aware of, especially if that is not your jam. Then as far as homeowners, appreciation is still kind of up in the air. We're not really sure how appreciation is going to take effect. You have these areas that, by Denver standard, are pretty affordable. At what point does that change? At what point do you see appreciation, or is it going to be pretty stable? And the last thing, and again, I don't, I'm going to be repetitive on some of these. As you get further into the eastern suburbs of the eastern plains of Colorado, we're not talking Rocky Mountains anymore. It's flat. So you're going to deal with higher wind. Typically, your snowstorms can be a bit more fierce. Some of your rain, you don't have the mountains blocking some of that wind. That is something to take into consideration. Rolling right along, we were talking about E470, and if you stay on E470, which kind of passes the airport, past some of these other communities, and heads due south, you hit South Aurora, and there we're talking about communities such as Callan's Reach, South Shore, Saddle Rock, Southlands Mall, and this is among the most popular growing communities in all of Aurora, and there's good cause for it. I mean, once you get out there, humbly speaking to me, a guy who lives 15 minutes from downtown, Southlands can feel like you're a ways away, but it's a very pretty community. A ton of new construction, a ton of what we call master planned perfection. They've really thought this through. One of the biggest aspects of this area will be that a lot of them are covered by Cherry Creek School District, which is among the highest rated school districts in the state of Colorado. I mentioned the master planned communities where they have pools and pocket parks and splash pads. You also have Southlands Mall right there in the heart of the community. Most of these neighborhoods were kind of built around Southlands Mall, if you will. Not really surrounding it, but you have Southlands Mall here and all these communities kind of wrapped around it along E470. And then another thing you'll notice is a lot of variance in houses, a lot of variations. You've got a lot of different home styles, townhomes, condos, you name it, but it doesn't look quite as cookie cutter as you'll see in certain new construction neighborhoods. And I have to mention Aurora Reservoir, which is one of my absolute favorite reservoirs. It's just right there in the heart of the community. Many people can walk to it. It's a bit of a weird drive leaving these communities. It looks like it's like 2 minutes away, but it's really about 15, 20. But there's a lot of them where you can just take a trail and walk over. It is a motorless reservoir, so a great place to go swimming, paddle boarding, get out for a kayak adventure. It's also randomly, if you're going to train to scuba dive in Colorado, a lot of people will go there for their scuba certification. Not the best scuba diving experience, but that's where you'll go. Now, negatives to Southeast Aurora, commute realities. I told you, like, this is really where, to me, you start to feel like you're away from the city. It's a bit of a drive. So you're looking at, if you're thinking about trying to get downtown, you're looking at a 50 to 60 minute drive, especially with traffic. That's pretty typical. Second thing I would mention is like suburb repetition, where it just, a lot of these communities, again, the houses look different. I'm not saying it's cookie cutter, but it's a suburb upon a suburb upon a suburb. Some of them, slightly nicer than the other, don't get me wrong, but it's not like you see a change up. It's just suburb. And listen, very important here, we've talked about affordability in a lot of these areas. Southeast Aurora is really where that affordability, when it comes to Aurora and Commerce City, goes by the wayside. This is where your price points are really going to start to match some of the other communities that we might talk about, including western suburbs and areas in Parker, which we're going to get to. This is where you're going to see in these, in the best neighborhoods, prices that are going to exceed $800,000 and well above that. And the last thing I would mention is, we talk about suburb upon suburb. Walkability doesn't really exist there. I mean, you're going to have to jump in your car and drive two things. Again, to get to Aurora Reservoir, to get to Southlands Mall, to get downtown, it's going to be a pretty expensive Uber ride, so be prepared to own a car. Next up on the list, again, continuing to head south, is Parker, Colorado. A place that I genuinely say, if my family decided we were going to move to the eastern side of Denver, I think odds are we would take a long look at Parker. I'm a fan of the town in general, although again, I do feel it gets a bit out there. I mean, you are getting farther and farther from the city of Denver, if that matters to you. So southeast of South Aurora, stretching down towards Castle Rock, again, south of Denver, you have Parker. Some of the pros of Parker: one, you have small town charm. You've got an actual downtown with character, not just a strip mall. And downtown Parker is cool. I say it every time. If you've seen any of my videos, I am a huge fan of little downtowns. Doesn't have to be massive, doesn't have to be the most spectacular thing ever, but I just like the community feel of a downtown area. Parker's got a great one. Fantastic on a summer day like today, where they've got, a bunch of restaurants and bars and stuff with the garage doors open and there are bands playing. There's people everywhere. Really cool community feeling. For the most part, again, always do your due diligence, but Douglas County Schools does a great job. I consistently hear from friends, clients, you name it, people who live in Parker rave about their schools there for the most part. Very rarely do I hear someone that is not at least happy. Maybe not thrilled, but at least happy. So overall, very good ratings there. Parker also gets consistently high livability scores for its trails, its community centers, and its events. When you think about like being neighborly and having these different events within your community, Parker ranks near the top, and it always has. It's really one of those suburbs that thought about how can we get people together? How do we keep them engaged? I think Parker has been a great role model for some of the other suburbs of Denver, including Lakewood, where I live, where they just encourage us to get together throughout the year for various things, through the summer, a trick-or-treat event in October. They have Parker Days, just a lot of things happening in Parker. Some of your negatives, we mentioned we're getting farther from Denver. So your commute to Denver can be, pretty long. Your commute to DIA, to the airport, can be pretty long, especially if we're talking about traffic. We could talk about some new build bloat, where you have starter homes that are now $700K plus. And this is, in some of these instances, some of these custom homes do start to look alike. And then a couple things, again, that I've heard from friends and colleagues alike and clients is that it's not for night owls. Parker's one of those towns that goes to bed pretty early. I don't really know of a suburb in Denver where I wouldn't make that claim, but I just hear it more about Parker, that it gets quiet early, and that infrastructure is catching up. So Parker's one of those areas where there's only a couple key access points to get into, such as Parker Road leads you south into Parker. And so because of that, your roads, some of your schools, just some of that infrastructure there in Parker is nearing capacity. They're trying to keep up. That's something you'll just kind of want to have awareness to. Now, we've covered most of the key suburbs of Denver, and I have a few that I just want to summarize very quickly. And before anybody says, I've got some suburbs that you could argue are north or south of Denver or east. Trust me, at some point we will cover all the key suburbs. But to finish, we are going to talk very briefly about Watkins, Bennett, and Strasburg. These are suburbs east of Aurora, way out on I-70. And yes, I apologize. I do say way out with respect to the people who live in these areas. And I'm going to admit right off the bat, I do not have drone footage of them yet. I will get out there at some point. I have not been able to yet. However, having experienced them in person and talked to enough people, here's a few facts about these areas. One, when we're talking about affordability with land, anybody who says, I want to own a house and I want some acreage, if the closer you get to the mountains, the more money you're going to need. So if we're trying to put affordability and land together, you're going to look at Watkins, Bennett, and Strasburg. That's where you can find a home with acreage for under $500,000. Other pros, it's big sky living. You want a shop on your land. You want the multi-car garage. You want goats. You want silence. This is going to be the area that is ideal for you. You want low regulation. You want freedom. You want people to leave you the hell alone. No HOAs, doing what you want to do. These, for the most part, great communities for that. Now, again, I'm telling you, you're out on I-70. This is not necessarily a place where you're going to have beautiful mountain views. Mountains are going to be quite a ways from you. That John Denver is full of shit, man. So prepare for long commutes. You're looking at 45 minutes if there's zero traffic to an hour 15, hour 30 to get from these towns into Denver. You're going to feel like you're in Kansas if that's not an okay thing with you. Prepare for a lack of amenities. There's not a lot of shops. There's not a lot of grocery stores. There's not a lot of schools. It's not a place where you're going to be able to really get picky about where you're getting education from as you might in a more populated area. And one of the biggest ones I kept hearing, and listen, I mentioned being on the eastern side of town, weather tends to hit. Well, this is where you are truly on the plains. There is nothing breaking that wind. So you will feel every snowstorm. You will feel every wind gust. It can be on the extreme side, at least by Denver standards. The last thing I would mention here, especially if you're thinking about buying something, is that lifestyle doesn't play to everybody. So the appreciation of your home, when you hear how Denver as a whole tends to appreciate, you might not see that on the eastern side. There's only so many people that want to invest in that part of town. And by invest, I mean live on that side of town. So my final take, and just kind of giving you some of my gut. Best all-around suburb for families and schools to me is going to be South Aurora. And that's just, again, you're covered by Cherry Creek School District. There's some great neighborhoods, some really good options. And that, when I ask people to kind of rate or rank theirs, South Aurora tends to come up highest. Best blend of charm and community. I told you, I'm a huge fan of Parker. I think that is where my family would end up if we moved to the east side of town. Best bet for long-term value, for where are things going to continue to grow and appreciate? To me, I think Painted Prairie and Reunion up in Commerce City are two areas that I would take a peek at. I think there's a lot of positive days ahead for them. Of course, there's a lot of development on the east side of town. So to me, a lot of opportunity. And then, yes, the best space for silence and peace and to kind of be left alone, if that's your thing, is going to be, those I-70 East suburbs, Watkins, Bennett, Strasburg. That's where I would look if you want, quiet, peace of mind, and people leaving you alone. Now, I will end with this, and I just want to be very clear to people as they start to look at eastern suburbs. There's some great suburbs east of Denver. There's some great communities. I have a lot of friends who live over there. I spend plenty of time there. It is a different style of living in some of these communities, and it's not going to have, a lot of them are not going to have the pretty of some of these western suburbs, like a Golden, like a Boulder, like a downtown Littleton. But if we're going to compare Boulder and Golden, those are some of the most expensive communities you are going to find. There is a premium to living west of I-25. Most of those suburbs are going to be more costly than eastern suburbs. There is a give and take. But overall, some amazing communities in these eastern suburbs that I would explore. I think there are some worthwhile communities. There are some great individuals, some of whom I've helped find their homes for them. Just a great area to check out. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions about it, feel free. Hit me up with a call, with a text, with an email. I'm here anytime you need me. In the meantime, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everett. That was the eastern suburbs of Denver, pros, cons, and where I'd actually live. Until I see you next time, peace.